from 13ABC. Conklin and Company with 13ABC Action News anchor Lee Conklin. First with what's happening behind the headlines. And Take 3, our panel of political analysts.
Good morning, everyone. Sean Hegarty in for Lee Conklin today. We thank you very much for joining us. A lot to get to today. We're really going to dig in on what's become a very hot topic throughout the area when it comes to education. We're going to hear from all sides today about what's happening in the Rossford School District. Plus, we're going to talk about national politics and a character of sorts that has now joined the race. I don't even need to say his name. You know it. Our political experts are going to dig in to the Donald later today. But first, we want to introduce the superintendent of Rossford Schools, Dan Krebs. And we thank you very much for joining us today. This is a very, I don't want to say divisive, but it's a hot issue in Rossford, which has gotten hundreds of people to come to your school board meetings now. The idea is of possibly moving the high school kids to Owens Community College. So tell me why, in your opinion, that would be a good idea.
Well, there's a number of facets or variables to that question, Sean. But if I could start with just the condition of our current facilities, there was a study conducted in December of 2012 that was then released in 2013. At that time, we had 5 buildings that we were using for educational purposes, and we were on 4 different campuses. Those buildings are aged 1922, 1927, 1929, 1965, 1970. Okay. Okay. And what that study determined at the end was that they required just under $39 million in upgrades. You'd still be in the same buildings with the same envelope, exterior envelope, but they required $39 million in upgrades. And that was eye-opening. Immediately. And the study further concluded that not only were those buildings unsuitable to today's educational standards, but also operating on that many different campuses in those buildings really was unsustainable over the long term.
So then Owens comes into play because you need to do something with the facilities, and $39 million is probably something you don't have sitting around. Right.
So when we're looking at all of that number of facilities across that many different campuses, the board had directed me to start looking at things differently. And really the move to Owens grew out of a LGIF grant that we had been awarded, and we were in partnership with the Wood County Port Authority, the Rossford Convention and Visitors Bureau, and the City of Rossford. And how to share resources, how to share space, copiers, that sort of thing. And eventually, College Credit Plus, the mandated program in the state of Ohio that will be starting this upcoming year, came into play. So we started to talking to Owens about that. And our conversations also with Owens talked about, well, maybe we can save some money by using perhaps your auditorium for some of our plays, or we can use their facilities for our prom and after prom, or maybe we could use them for graduation. And so those were our early discussions, which then late in that game, in the game of that grant study, how about moving your high school over to Owens? We have underutilized space here. We know you have a facility issue. We can make this work. And so that was kind of the genesis of how this all happened. And so here we are today. We started looking at that, space, is it feasible? And working through those individual elements on how we could move our high school there. That obviously would save our taxpayers between $35 and $40 million, because by doing that and securing a lease agreement with Owens, we now would not have to put a bond issue before voters to build a new high school.
So you've heard from a lot of parents, you've heard from a lot of people in the last couple of weeks about this. One of the big criticisms that I've heard is that Rossford has this unique downtown feel to where all the synergy is for the schools. And so many people I've talked with like that. It's unique, it's different. They say it's the heart of the community. Mm-hmm. Some say you might be ripping out the heart of the community if you move them. What would you say to that criticism?
Well, I think, I understand that as a graduate of Rossford myself, along with 2 brothers and 2 sisters that went through the system there. I can appreciate those feelings. But really, when you're talking about a school system, you're also talking about the community in which it's located. And you need a strong school system to have a strong community, and a strong community to support that strong school system. And part of this grant that we were talking about, Mayor McKinnon identified that the city is in trouble as well. And we need to, the city needs to generate some additional revenue to revive it, that downtown, which he had spoken about, that, you know, serving as the cornerstone to the redevelopment. And that, of course, required the sale of that high school property to a developer, should this move occur. Now, again, going back to that whole piece of being a graduate, if I can just touch on that from a student standpoint for just a moment, whether it be at the high school or one of our other facilities. Now, as we all know, you know, the academic standards are far more challenging than they've ever been in the history of education, and we're thankful for that. So when I walk into the high school, for instance, on a hot day, and I walk up those steps, and it can reach in excess of 90 degrees up there. And you're expecting these students to continue to learn in that area, in those conditions. That's a challenge. So what do? Well, you open the windows to help ventilate, because only portions of the high school are air conditioned and the elementaries are not. So you push the windows open. They're poorly ventilated buildings, as that report reflected as well. And now you also have traffic noise and all the downtown noise that goes through there. Traffic, and our fire and police emergency personnel are located down there. So that's another challenge you're facing. Switch to the winter months. Our students are in there, and they oftentimes will be sitting in shorts in the dead of winter, and there might be a window crack to kind of control the temperature in those rooms due to the age of those buildings.
So what about the potential of, not necessarily problems, but the mixing of college and high school students at Owens? Some parents say, you know, I send my kids to high school because they're in a high school student and that's what they're ready for. They're not necessarily ready to mix with college students.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the reasons why, you know, we delayed that move. We had talked about moving as early as this fall, and we again listened to the community and the feedback that we received, and we said, you know, we need more time to evaluate this. There were 3 items that came out of that were really strong and well, just thoughtful feedback. One of those was the cost, and we have yet to secure the cost, but we had people thinking it would be, you know, $200,000 a month for us to rent their facilities, and there were some people that were saying it was going to cost us over $2 million a year.
Wow.
So there's this wild variance. Now, we know that while we don't have a set figure with Owens, we're working through that with them. It's not going to be anywhere near that, because we both have a vested interest in providing a great opportunity for students. But we heard in that feedback that the financial piece needed to be straightened out and more information provided to the board.
So if you hear from the public again here further over and over again that they don't want to do it, are you going to take that into serious consideration when you make your decision?
I think that we are always accepting the feedback from the community. The other one we talked about was the security piece, and we addressed that a bit. So, you know, our staff, of course, is trained to be act in a supervisory manner. The space at Owens was dedicated, the classroom space, to us. It would involve also a school resource officer, a police officer in the area, and of course Owens has its own police force to address that safety piece. The other thing was the identity of the high school, and that's another piece we're working through with Owens concerning signage. How do we make this our own? And we're convinced with further study that that can be accomplished. To answer your question, you know, my job is to continue to answer those questions that have been provided to us, and we're going to do that and release that publicly as soon as we have that, and there's a process involved with that. And also, then it'll be my job to take that information to the board. We, as you know, are studying different options that may or may not include Owens. But when I'm told to, you know, you need to look at this, we look first and foremost at opportunities we can offer our students. We look at How are we going to do that, and in what kind of facilities we're going to be able to do that? And an important part, a third part of that is, what's the cost to the taxpayer?
Yeah, absolutely. That's the one you have to answer to. Superintendent Dan Krebs, we thank you very much for your time. Now, not everybody is necessarily on board with this plan. We're going to hear the other side of the argument coming up. Welcome back, everyone. Sean Hegarty in for Lee Conklin, and we promised you both sides of the debate of the Rossford School Issue Show. We'll welcome in Angela Shapiro, who is a parent who your child is not quite yet in high school.
Right.
She's only 8.
She's 8 months old. That's
so
right.
There. So tell us why, in your opinion, as a Rossford resident, why the Owens is a bad idea.
Well, Owens is a bad idea on multiple levels. It's a bad idea on the most superficial, obvious level, which is that safety concerns were not considered or thought out, that costs weren't even considered or nailed down before this was proposed to us as a community. And the proposal itself was given at the same time as they dropped the bomb that the final Board of Education vote to move to Owens would be 2 weeks later, 2 weeks after that meeting. So it's problematic from that perspective as well, because that opens up a real concern that our school board, our Board of Education, is not acting responsibly, is not gathering information, is moving quickly, and to what end? It's certainly not for the best interest of our students. So what is true end game there? And that started to open up a lot of questions within the community and has gotten a very large community discussion going.
A lot of that's happening on Facebook.
It is.
Right
Yes, it's kind of fortuitous timing. I had started a Facebook group to discuss Rossford issues just before this happened because I was having difficulty finding a place to ask questions and get community discussion going about proposed ordinances at the time. So completely unrelated to this, but because the Owens news broke right after I started that page, it kind of became a place where people came to discuss this.
And one place that people came to discuss the Rossford issue was at the community forum.
Yes.
After the original announcement of the Owens deal that was potential to happen, and
Right.
some people said it was definitely going to happen, then it was pushed back a year. Do you feel as though the school board is listening, at least at this small victory maybe for you that it got pushed back a year? Do you think the board will be listening to you?
I think 2 members of our board are listening to us, and I think 3 have determined quite a long time ago that whether it's Owens or someplace else, we're getting off the high school property. We're going to transfer that to the Port Authority so that we don't have to go through competitive bidding. And that's going to be developed into an urban lifestyle development. That's the mayor's words, who's been working with the Port Authority and the superintendent without directive from the Board of Education, without open meetings, without any transparency whatsoever to develop this entire master plan that does not just involve Owens. Owens is a piece of the puzzle, but it's not even the most important piece. And it is not off the table. What's been pushed back a year is the move,
Right.
not a vote and not the further consideration. They continue to refuse to listen to the citizens and the voters of Rossford that we do not want to move our high school. We will renovate, we will consider building new, but we do not want to leave our downtown property where our school is the heart of our community.
Okay, great idea, great plan, sounds good. Where's the money going to come from to do that? Superintendent just told us $39 million in repairs. Where was it coming from?
Well, let's back up one step and ask, why do we have $39 million of repairs that need to be made when every single year there is a capital improvement fund that the state says you must set aside this amount of money to spend on your capital improvements, repairs, rebuilding, renovations. We spend a fraction of that amount every single year. So the taxpayers are coming to the board and saying, we want to renovate, we want to keep our building. The board is saying, I don't hear you, I don't want to hear you. They keep putting proposals in front of us to instead move out to Glenwood or to now go to Owens. They don't listen to us, and instead what are they doing? They're allowing our building to fall into a state of repair such that they can make this very argument. We call it demolition by neglect up in the Detroit area where I was originally from,
Okay.
and that's exactly what I see happening here today. And when we went to the school board and asked these questions of the school board and said, why are you doing all of this with no transparency, ignoring what we want, not involving the community, one of the board members actually interrupted a board member who was explaining why she agrees with us, what's wrong, to say, They don't have to listen to us. It doesn't matter what we want. And that's the problem. That's a huge problem. We've got irresponsibility with plans like Owens, where I walked in on the tail end of the superintendent's discussion with you, where he was talking about dedicated space for the students. One example of a huge problem here. That's not what we had. What we were presented with was mixed space across the board. We had classrooms that were interspersed, Owens, Rossford, Owens, Rossford. You can look at the plans that they put up there. There's highlighting, yellow highlighting. You'll see where they anticipated to have Rossford students. There are areas that are open not just to Owens students, whose average age, by the way, is 25. That's a concern when you're dealing with high school students.
Well, but the superintendent did say there would be a dedicated safety officer, which includes the Owens safety force as well.
Isn't
so they're
that
making those plans.
And they actually. He attended the Owens meeting where this was revealed, the chief of their police staff at Owens. And you could, the mayor and the superintendent very much anticipated that he was going to stand up and say, yes, I will be there to make sure your children are safe. Instead, when they threw it over to him, he was honest and he said, listen, we won't be there. These are concerns, these are safety concerns that have to be addressed by the schools. We can be there when something happens to help clean it up. That is not good enough. And the fact that they suggested is tells me again, we have a board, or at least a superintendent, who is not interested in what's truly the best for the students or the best for the community, but has a plan in mind that has been underway the whole time. And that's where that LGIF fund comes in as well, which funded the study that led to Owens.
Now, he will say that he's trying to be financially responsible for the district because the money's not there to fix the facilities. So let me ask you this. If push came to shove and they went back to citizens and said, listen, here's the dollar amount we need for the buildings, we're going to go to the voters, do you want to do it? Do you think the support is there from voters to do it?
I do. I think the support has been there all along to renovate the high school where it stands.
Downtown.
Downtown. But if they insist on wanting to take that property away from us and sell it out from under us, then we're never going to reach a resolution. And instead, what is going to happen is they will force us out to Owens so they can do the same thing. They're going to transfer that property to the Port Authority, and the Port Authority is going to sell it to avoid competitive bidding.
Do you think, as we wrap up here, do you think the school board is listening to residents right now?
No. I think 2 of the school board members are listening to residents. The third have their mind set up, or mind made up, and have for several years, which is why we have currently more than $2 million in capital improvement funds that have accumulated over the years that are not being spent. That's why we have a school board who's not using energy funds that are available to us without going to the taxpayers for another levy, and they're not using it to help to rebuild our schools. There's a reason they're trying to force us out of it. They are not listening to us. And I wish that the Attorney General, that the Ethics Commission, that anybody at all would come out and take a look at what the Rossford schools are doing and what they're doing in combination with the city and with the Port Authority under this LGIF grant that was, in my opinion, secured using false pretenses. They secured that grant to do this Owens study, saying they were going to look to have a shared administration building. Look at the LGIF grant application, look at every page. That's all they went in to do. Instead, they used that as a forum to have meetings outside of the public that were not open.
All right. Sounds like you'll be very passionate about the subject.
I will, absolutely.
We appreciate your time, Angela.